The moment shattered quietly, the way important moments often do, not with noise but with a breath held too long. Rain pressed softly against the cafe windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and gray, and in that small space between two steaming cups of coffee and an unopened menu, a young woman lowered her eyes and admitted something that felt heavier than the storm outside. She could not afford this date. It was not shame that filled the air, but fear, the kind that comes from wanting connection while knowing your pockets are empty and your pride already bruised. Across from her sat a single father who had learned long ago how fragile dignity could be. And in that instant, everything changed. Before the story unfolds any further, pause for a second. If you believe that kindness still matters, that second chances can rewrite broken chapters, and that small acts can change entire lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist because people like you believe they should. He had not planned on going out that night. Life as a single dad rarely allowed for spontaneity, and even less for romance. His evenings were usually filled with reheated dinners, homework spread across the kitchen table, and the soft weight of exhaustion settling into his bones once his son fell asleep. But something about her profile had felt different. Maybe it was the honesty in her smile, or the way she talked about rebuilding after loss. Or maybe it was simply that lonely people recognize one another without needing words. He had chosen a modest cafe, nothing fancy, because extravagance had never been his style. He lived by budgets and lists, by careful planning and quiet sacrifices. She arrived slightly late, cheeks flushed from rushing through the rain, apologizing with nervous energy that made her seem both strong and fragile at once. She talked about working 2 jobs, about sending money home to help her mother, about dreams postponed until further notice. He listened more than he spoke, a habit formed from years of being the steady one, the listener, the parent. For a while it felt easy. Laughter came softly. The world outside the cafe faded, and then the menu arrived, and with it, reality. Her hands trembled as she stared at the prices, numbers that might have meant nothing to some but loomed like cliffs to her. She had planned to order something small, to sip water and smile, to make it through without revealing the truth. But honesty had always been her burden and her gift. She leaned forward, voice barely audible beneath the cafe hum, and admitted she could not afford this. She expected pity, perhaps discomfort, maybe even irritation. What she feared most was judgment. What she did not expect was the way his expression softened, not with sympathy, but with recognition. He knew that feeling intimately. Years earlier, after his wife passed away unexpectedly, he had stood in grocery aisles calculating whether he could afford both fruit and cereal that week. He had learned how quickly life could strip you bare, how pride becomes a luxury when survival is at stake. He did not see her as less than. He saw her as brave. Instead of awkward silence or hurried excuses, he shifted the moment. He suggested, gently and without drawing attention, that they share. Not because he was paying, not because she needed help, but because sharing felt human. He spoke about his son, about how they split meals sometimes to make it fun, turning necessity into connection. The tension eased, replaced by something warmer, something real. They ordered simply. No one stared, no one judged, and the rain outside began to slow. As the evening unfolded, she learned about his life in pieces. About early mornings and late nights, about school lunches packed with notes, about the quiet grief that still visited him when the house was too silent. He spoke of love not as something dramatic, but as something practical, built from showing up every day, even when you are tired and scared. She listened with eyes that glistened, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen. When the bill came, he paid without ceremony, not as a gesture of dominance or rescue, but as an offering of normalcy. He did not mention money again. Instead, he asked about her dreams, the ones she kept alive in the margins of her life. She spoke of wanting to go back to school, of creating stability, of one day not having to count every coin before making a choice. He did not promise to fix anything. He simply listened, and sometimes that is what changes people the most. They walked outside together afterward, the air fresh and clean after the rain. The city felt quieter, as if giving them space. There was no grand confession, no dramatic kiss under streetlights, just a shared smile and a sense that something important had begun, not because of romance alone, but because of respect. When they parted ways, she felt lighter than she had in months, not because her problems were gone, but because she no longer felt alone with them. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. They met again, often choosing simple things: walks in the park, coffee at home, dinners cooked together with ingredients carefully chosen but filled with laughter. She met his son slowly and thoughtfully, understanding the gravity of stepping into a child's world. She never pretended to be more than she was. He never asked her to. They built something honest, brick by brick. Life did not suddenly become easy. Bills still came. Work remained exhausting. There were arguments born from stress and fear. But there was also growth. Encouraged by his quiet belief in her, she applied for a scholarship she had convinced herself she would never get. When the acceptance email arrived, she cried on his shoulder, the kind of cry that releases years of doubt. He celebrated not with grand gestures, but with pride that shone in his eyes. For him, change came too. Loving again had felt impossible after loss. But she taught him that love does not replace what was lost, it expands to include what is new. His son thrived in the warmth of a household that slowly grew brighter. The boy learned, by example, what kindness looks like when it is not performative, when it costs something but is given freely anyway. Years later, she would think back to that first night often. To the fear she felt admitting her truth. To the relief that followed when it was met with compassion instead of judgment. She would realize that moment had reshaped her understanding of worth. That she had learned she did not need to be whole or wealthy to deserve respect. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is whisper your reality and trust someone with it, and he too would remember. Not as the night he paid for dinner, but as the night he chose to see someone fully, without ego, without expectation. It reminded him that being a provider was not just about money. It was about creating safety, about making space for honesty, about teaching his son, through action, how to be a good man in a complicated world. If this story is stirring something in you, if it reminds you of moments when kindness showed up unexpectedly, or when you wish it had, please take a second now to like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to believe. Just before we reach the end, we have one special request. If this story resonated with you in any way, comment the word kindness below and share a moment when compassion changed your life, even in a small way. In the end, this was never a story about money or dates or even romance. It was a story about two people meeting at the edge of their limitations and choosing humanity over pride. About a single father who understood that dignity is fragile and worth protecting. About a woman who found strength in vulnerability. And about how the smallest acts, offered quietly, can echo through years, reshaping lives in ways no one could predict. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel seen or hopeful or reminded you that goodness still exists, please engage with this video. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together, we can keep sharing reminders that kindness, when given freely, always comes back in ways that truly matter.